Welcome to the Mystic Detectives podcast, where we seek to unlock the wonders of the unknown. I'm one of your hosts, Crystal Miller.
And I'm your other host, Andrea Marziano. Hi, Crystal. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am good. We've been having the mercurial weather lately, warm, rain, as is the time of season, especially here in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, we've
What
been
have you?
having wind and tornadoes. So,
Yeah, I was going to ask you, have you had another tornado recently?
well, we did have one. Let's see. I can't remember.
You had just been in shelter that
Oh,
the
yes.
day
Okay. That's
we
right.
recorded last.
That's right. Okay. So, no, we have not had any since then. We have had several windy days and several flood warnings, actually. But nothing, no tornadoes and nothing to shelter from. Thank
That's
goodness.
good. Yeah, that's as exciting as one might think. So, what's going on in your life? I hear you have some news.
Yeah, we got tore in a car. Yay! It was quite the adventure. So um, I have no idea if their dad will ever listen to this, but their dad said that he would give them $1,500 to buy a car. Just because I've bought, other than the car that he just bought for Kira, I've bought all of the cars for the kids every time. And
Hmm.
so I'm just like, dude, your turn. Anyway, and so we were looking and looking, and it's not, it's not 2000 anymore. You can't get a car for
No,
$1,500 that's going to run.
it's
Yeah,
better.
every single one was for parts only, for parts only, for parts only. So anyway, long story short, we started looking at cars that were more expensive. Not much more expensive. We went up to 3,000, and we kind of figured maybe we could negotiate down to like 2,500 or whatever. Anyway, long story short, we found one, and we went to test drive it, and it was awesome. And um, it was $3,300.
Hmm.
And so Torin asked their dad, will you buy this one? And um, Brett was like, I'll give you $3,000. You figure it out. So,
Oh,
so I
yeah,
just
but
messaged.
still.
I know, but I messaged the guy, and I said, I'm really sorry. Their dad would only give him $3,000. So, thanks for being. You were very kind, and great car. Good luck.
Hmm.
And he'd been very clear when we were test driving it that he'd gotten offers below his asking price, and he turned them all down because he wasn't looking for. I mean, sorry, he wasn't in a hurry to sell it. And so when I said that, he said, "I'll take 3,000 for it," and I was like, "What? Okay,
Nice.
then we want to buy it." Anyway, so it's a stick shift. So Torin has been teaching themselves how to drive a stick this week. And when we went and bought it and got the title and everything, we bought it on April 30th. And the guy accidentally put May 30th on the title. So we had bought
Oh,
a car in the future because we're amazing and magical like that. And
that
so
isn't
there
it?
was
That's a new mystical episode right there.
that's right. How to buy it in the future. Anyway, there was a whole other rigmarole where I had to get an error affidavit and get it notarized and all this stuff. And
Mm.
originally, the tag agency had told me that I had to have the exact same notary notarize it. This was way up 40 miles away in Oklahoma City, and I'm like, oh. So that was a really terrible noise for a podcast, probably. But anyway, so um, and so I started researching it because I'm like, I don't even know who notarized it. This guy,
Also, that doesn't make any sense.
no, it doesn't. But this guy drove us to like a little um, Latino mart, and we don't know where it was. We don't know who notarized
Yeah,
this, right? Like,
right.
anyway, so I looked and I looked it up, and I did see that it didn't have to be notarized by the same notary, just notarized. So I went and I filled it out, took it to a different notary close by, and then I went to a different tag agency just in case. So we were able to get it the same day. Yay!
Yay. Well, I made the mistake of correcting an error on a title, and I had to go through a lot of the same process. So, note to self, don't
Mm.
try and fix anything because
No,
it does not work. It's such a pain. And I also had to pay again because it was
oof,
my error.
right.
And oh
Yeah,
my goodness. Yeah, well that's exciting. I
yeah,
I think it's a fun time. Like we talked about a little bit before, a tiny bit nerve-wracking because you've got
yeah.
another one out in the wild.
Yeah.
but then it takes a little more pressure off because then you don't have to drive or coordinate driving with
Right,
another
and
one
I
of
have
the
my car back, so, like, I've
and that's a plus.
been stuck at home. I mean, of course I work, I have a job, so it's not like it's horrible, but there are times, it would have been nice to, like, run grab a soda or something, and I'm like, "Ugh, I don't have a car."
I get that. Although I haven't had that experience for a while. We did have one of the cars in the shop, but it was like for an afternoon, so not too much of a difficulty.
Yeah.
But that's awesome. Well, how exciting. What
Yeah.
kind of car is it? Did you say? I don't
It's
recall.
a Kia Soul, it's a 2010
Oh,
Kia Soul.
I think those are cute. What color?
Yeah. It's maroon. It's, different oh, sorry, it's less maroon than my car, so it's more
Uh-huh.
red.
Yeah.
Um, it's funny because we have the red carnation. Literally, Zach, Holly, and my car are the exact same color, and so now Torrin comes in, and it's like the redheaded stepchild because it's just not quite the same color. And it's
That's
funny because
hilarious.
it's got some cosmetic damage, and Torrin was, uh, really cute. They were like, um, when we were driving home, they were like, "I'm not gonna lie, like, that damage goes hard. Looks really cool." I was like, "Great."
Yay for wanting damage. I would be taking there's those stickers that look like Band-Aids. I'd be putting Band-Aids on it or
That'd be
something.
funny, yeah.
It
That'd
would
be
be
funny.
funny. Oh my goodness. Well, that's exciting. What it's just another step to the growth process of the family.
Yeah, yeah, I'm getting
Nice.
really close to an empty nest. It's wild.
Yeah. Some of them fly back. Well, today I've done some research on something I've been considering lately, and it's do you know what the witching hour is or devil's hour? Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard it. I'm not sure if I know what it is. What I think it is like the moment that day turns into dusk, maybe?
Well, and in some definitions, they actually do that definition. However, the most common definition is the witching hour, devil's hour is a time of night that's associated with supernatural events. And it's the time where witches, demons, and goals, ghosts, well, are thought to appear and be at their most powerful. And so, like I say, the definitions vary a little bit, but mostly they consider the witching hour between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m.
Okay.
And so it's a term that most of us have heard through time, like you say, but it's like, well, it has a connotation kind of something, but a lot of people don't know what it is. So guess what? Our podcast episode is about the witching hour.
Cool.
And it was really fun to research because again, I've heard it, gosh, probably my whole life, but I didn't really know what it was. And when I found in my research, and I don't have technical scientific journals this time because it's not a technical scientific thing, but I did find in the research that they have documented the witching hour phrase beginning at least as early as 1775. And it was actually first written in a poem, Night, an Ode, and it was by Reverend Matthew West. And the origins may go back further to 1535 because the Catholic Church that year prohibited activities during 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. due to emerging fears about witchcraft in Europe.
Ding.
Yeah, and so they just said, "Nope, nothing can happen during those times." I suspect there wasn't a whole lot going on anyway,
No
um,
kidding.
but it's something that
That
was banned.
that's
Um,
funny because that is reminiscent to me of our common religious phrase of the Holy Ghost goes to bed at midnight.
yeah, and nothing happens at after good happens after midnight and things like that.
Yeah.
And actually, it's been considered a truth with air quotes for many, many years. And this kind of segues into that is in Western Christian tradition, the hour between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. was also considered a peak of supernatural activity and considered to be the devil hours, as we just said, because it's they say it's a mocking inversion of the time when Jesus supposedly died, which was 3 p.m.
Ah,
I know,
interesting.
that's right. And so I find it fascinating that most sources say it's from 3 to 4 a.m. So I have a question for you. How often do you wake up between 3 and 4 a.m.?
More often than other hours.
Yes,
For
exactly.
real, yeah.
Me too, me too. And there was a time that I extended a little bit where I was waking up at 4:44 every morning.
Wow.
And what's funny about that is there's a gentleman who lives here on in the RV part of this property, and he leaves at 4:45, not a minute sooner ever. So
So
I would
funny.
wake up, then I would hear him. He doesn't
Wow.
wake me up. He rides a motorcycle, Harley, and so it makes quite a bit of noise, but unless I'm already awake, I don't hear him at
Uh-huh.
that time. So, I mean, yes, it was a little later than the typical witching hour. However, I wondered what part of my being was setting my clock to that time. And of
Mhm.
course, at that moment, I usually have to go to bathroom immediately, if not sooner.
Right.
But, it's like, "Oh, again." But, it was anyway, I just thought that was fascinating, but very often, I'd say 3 or 4 times a week, I wake up between 3 and 4. Now, there's some evidence that there's a physiological reason for that, which we'll get to in a bit. Um, but also, this is part of the physiological thing where the idea of the witching hour may stem from the human sleep cycle and the circadian rhythm because the body's going through REM sleep at that time, where the heart rate is slower, body temperature is reduced, breathing pattern and blood pressures are irregular.
Mm.
So, if we suddenly awake from the REM sleep, it can cause agitation, fear, and disorientation. And and so when I've woken during those hours, I don't ever feel those things. I just I feel like I wake up just awake.
Uh-huh.
Nothing I don't typically feel like I've awakened from a nightmare or anything like that. Do you?
Not typically. I mean, I do have times I've woken up from a nightmare and or maybe not even I don't even know if it's from a nightmare. I've woken up after a nightmare even. But I don't it's typically regular time in the morning. So yeah, I feel like when I wake up what I would call it in the middle of the night, air quotes,
Mhm.
yeah, it is usually just a kind of a slow process, it's just kinda like, "Oh, now I'm awake," kinda thing,
Mm. Mhm.
So, no
Mhm.
jolting or anything like that, no agitation that I can think of.
Well, in our giant scientific study between the 2 of us, we have some similarities. I love how scientific our studies get. Um, also, it's some of the research I found says that during REM sleep, which usually occurs within the witching hour, like we said, unpleasant and frightful sleep disturbances such as parasomnias can be experienced, which includes nightmares, rapid eye movement, sleep behavior disorder, night terrors, sleepwalking, homicidal sleepwalking, and sleep paralysis. So
Ah!
I used to sleepwalk a lot when I was younger, and I
Uh-huh,
used to talk in my sleep a lot. I
uh-huh,
know that my twin sister and I actually slept walk together 3 or 4 times that my parents documented, and
uh-huh.
we did activities, and I don't know if I've told you this, but we one time both got up, and the parents said, "Why are you girls up?" And we didn't answer at all, and and then we went into the kitchen and got a bowl, a big bowl. I envision it as our everyone had a Tupperware giant bowl that was everything from a cake mixing bowl, popcorn bowl, to an emesis basin,
Right.
and, I think everyone I know had one of those, and if y'all need to know what emesis is, go ahead and look it up. Um, but we went and got the bowl, put some water in it, brought 2 spoons out, not talking or anything, and we sat in the hallway, stirred it, finished doing whatever we were doing, got up and went back to bed. Not a word was uttered between us, my mom said. And she
Wow.
said that it was super creepy. And we did a couple other things like that, but that was the most notable, she said. And then when I was in college, I had roommates, and one roommate would say, "Oh my gosh, you talked again last night." And I wouldn't do it all the time, but she said, "The thing that's frustrating is I cannot understand you." And she said, "If you're gonna wake me up talking, you have to say something, and if it's gonna be something, it better be juicy." And I just remember going, "I didn't know I was doing it." I feel like it's possible that I had sleep apnea then as well,
Mhm.
because, mine is considered, central, so it's my brain saying breathing's optional, and so is that part of the the witching hour or the devil's hour? I don't
Ooh.
know.
Ooh.
Ooh. But one of the things too is, this the night terrors. Now, didn't one of your kids have night terrors?
Zachary did, yeah,
Yeah, I thought so.
yeah, and what's crazy is he had them so bad, and so the internet was newish, but not, like, entirely new, um, uh, and I was searching and searching and searching and searching and searching and searching for something to help this poor kid, right?
Mhm.
And it ended up that what cured it, treated it, whatever you wanna call it, was putting having him wear socks to bed. That was it.
Really? Because what,
Yep.
he got cold maybe?
I don't know, but I found in some obscure, like, homeschooling blog, you know, corner of the internet, I can't talk, that idea, and I was like, "I have tried literally everything else. Screw it. Let's put some socks on him."
Yeah,
And
and that was long before weighted blankets too, right?
long before weighted blankets, yep.
Mhm.
And
Mm.
sure enough, they were gone.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That I just wow. Huh.
I always
What
tell people actually with kids that have night terrors, I tell them that because, um, it's just so weird and, like, it seems so unlikely, and, I mean, nobody's ever reported back to me like, "Oh, you know, you my child doesn't have night terrors either anymore," but still,
Mhm.
I make sure there's 2 things I pass on to people, a little off topic, but 2 things I pass on to people, and that's socks for night terrors and warm feet, cold neck for migraines.
Yeah, definitely tried and true.
Yep.
Although the sock thing might be a wives' tale, the the other one for headaches is definitely physiologically related. So for many people, well, one of the other things is the more physiological thing that during the witching hour. Oh wait, before I go there, did you notice the time frame when Zach had his night terrors? Were they consistent at all, or just random? Do you
You
remember?
know, I don't remember.
Yeah, I just wondered, well, since it has been a minute and you have a few children, I have 2 and I still get confused, so I just don't even know. But one of the things that it was saying in my research is that during the witching hour, the 3 to 4 AM time frame, symptoms of illness and conditions such as lung disease, asthma, flu, and the common cold seems to exacerbate because there's less cortisol in the blood at night, and especially during sleep, which makes sense because if our cortisol, which is our stress hormone, is high during when we're attempting to sleep, we
Right.
probably couldn't. So I wondered if the transverse can be true as far as the waking cycle. If people are awake during those
Mhm.
times, is their cortisol higher? Don't know. Um, and maybe somebody has studied that. I did not actually look that part up. But one of the things it also said in the same article was that the immune system becomes very active and white blood cells fight infections in the body because during sleep, and which would worsen the symptoms of fever, nasal
Mhm.
congestion, cough, chills, and sweating because those are immune responses. And I've told you before, I've listened to
Mhm.
This Podcast Will Kill You, and I love it. It's a medical podcast, not a murder podcast, but it's a medical podcast talking about various things. And recently they were talking about a fever and how a fever is physiologically necessary to our bodies to be able to clear
Uh-huh.
some of this stuff. And in most countries, we have been fighting it a lot. And the postulation was, could it be making some of these things worse because we're not letting our bodies doing it? And if we're not letting our bodies do these things, are we also training our bodies not to do these things?
Yeah, so
And
I don't treat a fever unless it's, like, over 102. And as
yeah,
you know, when I had my staph infection in my hip, it jumped in the course of 30 minutes from
right.
101 to 104.5. So, like, so again, just we're not giving medical advice, but for for me, it's like, yeah, let your fever do its thing. But if it does get to a certain point, your body can't fight that.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what they said in the podcast as well, and they said too, if it becomes so uncomfortable that a person can't tolerate it, then it may be time to medicate, and also may be time to go see their healthcare provider because there may be
Yeah.
something else going on. What I notice is during the time that I wake up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, between 3 and 4 usually, is I wake up very hot, And could it be menopausal hormones? Yes. Um, could it be just this process with my immune system working? Yes.
Uh-huh. Well, sometimes I wake up drenched in sweat, and I can tell you it's
Mhm.
not menopausal hormones because
Mhm.
I actually asked my doctor this year if I was in menopause, and she did tests and said, "No, you are not. You're not even premenopause at this point or
Do
perimenopausal." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So yeah, but I do sometimes, and it's so inconsistent, like
Mm.
there's no like, "Oh yeah, today Odyssey turned the air conditioner off," or nothing. It's bizarre to
Yeah,
me.
yeah,
And have
and
I paid attention to the time that I'm waking up? No, sorry, I haven't. But it is very interesting.
I don't always, but sometimes I notice that I get in these cycles where I'll wake up at almost the same moment every single morning, if you will, because it is usually after 2 or 3 in the morning, and, so I do notice that, but I try not to look too much because then it does wake me up. Because then I've got the blue light if it's on my
Right.
phone or whatever like
Yep.
that, but when I get up from bed, my watch is on the charger, and just getting up and moving near it makes it light up a little bit, so sometimes
Uh-huh.
I'll go, "What? One eyeball." So anyway, but it's just I invite our audience to consider if this happens to them, and let us know what they find if they notice any of these things happening during the witching hour. Also, something I found that was really surprising to me a little bit is to reduce gun violence. There was a curfew hour and hour set in Washington D.C. And it's been enforced between 11 p.m. and 12 a.m.
Hmm.
And which is some people considering a witching hour, as you mentioned before. Some people look at it dusk and dawn. That's not as common, but 11 to 12 a.m. is not uncommon, but not the typical witching hour people talk about. And they did this curfew to lower juvenile gunfire incidents because they were influenced by the idea of witching hour. The Washington, D.C. government was thinking, well, maybe this could be it. And so they tried it, and they noticed that and violent crimes of a variety of natures would peak at midnight on average, and DUI police incidents would usually tend to occur around 2 a.m.
Mm.
And of course, there is some coordination with bars closing,
Yeah, yeah.
but still, it's something they notice. So they put some bans out, and the curfew was meant for juveniles, and so I guess they also thought that if they could get the juveniles off the roads and out of the streets, then maybe at least it'll improve outcomes.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was just one of the things I found. And as you mentioned, the sunset and sunrise is sometimes associated with it, but it's just not very common. And,
That's actually not what I said, though. I said when the day turns to dusk.
oh, yes, uh, sunset and oh, yeah, that isn't what you said at all. But anyway, so what you said, nobody believes. No, just kidding, just kidding.
Well, I
I
believe it. No,
interpreted
just kidding.
I interpreted it to what I wanted it to say to match my information. That's hilarious, thanks for correcting me. Um, sheesh. And that actually goes to show that we hear what we wanna hear.
Yeah.
And so some of the psychological literature suggests that um, people have experiences they call apparitional, which is ghosts and psychic and that kind of phenomenon. I can never say that word. Say it, will you? Phenomenon.
Phenomenon.
Yeah, didn't the Muppets do that one time so
They
people could
did
pronounce it correctly?
phenomena.
Ah, see, that's probably what I'm gonna say. Anyway, they noticed that those episodes are most common between 2 and 4 a.m. They say that this is aligning with a peak in melatonin leaving the body. So our melatonin will build up, our natural melatonin will build up, and then it'll start going down between 2 and 4 a.m. So our bodies can start to prepare to wake up. And they say also that this can be another time of sleep disturbances potentially related to melatonin versus the witching hour.
I
What'd you
had
tell?
a thought.
Hmm.
Um, I wonder, about the ambient effect, right? Where
Yes.
you could go to the Home Depot and spend $500 and never know
Yeah.
you went. I wonder if there's any pattern of that happening between 2 and 3 a.m. That'd be interesting.
It would be. I did hear I did hear a little vignette, for a hometown story on one of our favorite podcasts, My Favorite Murder, and they were talking about how the, um the mother would take her Ambien at whatever time she took it, and they knew about half an hour later she'd be gone to totally asleep. And one day, her husband found her in bed dressed in her like her night clothes and slippers and a bathrobe, and which was uncommon to have her slippers on in the bed. And he thought that was weird. She must have just gotten cold. And then he went into the kitchen and found a stack of videos of the adult nature and a receipt. And he's like, "Wait a minute, that was not typically in their house." And she woke up and it was the receipt with her credit card on it. And she woke up and her husband said, Why did you go out and get these videos?" "I didn't go out. What are you talking about?" Well, it turned out they went to the store and she was on video in the store in her pajamas with her bathrobe and
That's
her slippers
funny.
on. And she had bought these videos and she was mortified because she said they're going to think anyway, but it was really funny. And so but that was based on Ambien. And Ambien does have some pretty significant side effects, as we mentioned, so people get to use that with caution and only with medical advice. But could it be related? Is it only Ambien? Is it the witching
Who
hour?
knows? I mean, I like to think that it's a combination of both, um, but I'm also, the opposite of a skeptic where I'm like, "Sure, I'll believe that." I take Lunesta because I was afraid of Ambien, and I've Ambiened myself once, and I cannot remember what I did. Holly might know, but yeah, I did something really wacko, and, I was like, "This is the whole reason I didn't wanna take Ambien." But, yeah.
Exactly. It can have that effect on people. I take it like once every 6 months. I get 15 pills a year. And sometimes I'll get into this sleep cycle that wakes me up like this we're talking about all the time. And I don't come out of it naturally. So if I take one about every 6 months, um, it takes me out of it. And then I can get back into a more normal sleep cycle. So
And
maybe
then
my
there's my
witching hour is
dad
strong.
who just sleeps. Like,
Right.
Ambien just works for him, so he takes an Ambien, he goes to sleep, he wakes up in the morning like a normal human being.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good because it's supposed to work that way. So, so some other research I found is there are 11 apparently spiritual meanings of waking up at 3 a.m. So,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, 11. Who decided they were the 11? Not really
Yeah, no
sure.
kidding.
But they are saying that, as I said before, that's when the hour that is a way for ghost schools and other apparitions to come out and play because we are actually at our least guarded
Yeah.
and they can communicate with us, and also some people consider that that's the closest time that God or source or universe has to communicate with us as well. And the
I think
article I read, what?
I think Spinal Tap probably decided there were 11.
Probably. Oh my goodness, yes, we should take all of our knowledge from that. Um, I only have vague recollections of that movie, but, and I love this quote. It says, "Whether you take these stories seriously or treat them as superstitious old wives' tales, one thing is for sure, you better watch out when the witching hour approaches." Woo!
Woo.
I love that. I was like, I gotta mention that one. And so they talk a little bit about this was um, I got it from Peprera Wellness, I think it says, is how it's pronounced. Anyway, it talks about waking up at the same time every night have may have more meaning than meets the eye. And again, it could be a spiritual sign, and it could be something deeper and more profound. And one of the things that every source I saw says, well, you may want to consider what happens during those times. See if you notice anything, seeing if something is consistent. Maybe the dreams have a message. Some people will say, write those dreams down because they could be significant.
Mhm.
And and so it's obviously what a person may want to do. It does say in my research and also personal experience, people who regularly wake up at 3 a.m. might find themselves feeling exhausted. Yes,
Weird.
yes, right. And I'm like, yep, check that one off. But some people feel sometimes more spiritually attuned um, when they go back to sleep for some reason.
Hmm.
I have typically felt more exhausted, but one of the things, number one, is this waking can increase psychic abilities. And some people say that it is a time of heightened spiritual awareness. Like I said before, is that maybe because our defenses are down, and also that we may be manifesting more things on emotional sensitivity, dreams, or unusual thoughts. We might be just doing some manifesting them. Also, we may be able to be more open for messages from beyond. And
I'm
some
nodding.
people,
I've just realized
yeah,
nodding is not great for podcasts. Sorry.
it really, yeah. And I was watching you nod. So yes, yes, I see you nodding, and now we can hear you. I'm actually kind of glad we can't hear you because that might indicate a neck issue as you crunk crunk. Oh my goodness. And also, excuse me, some the number two information is it believes that when one wakes up at 3 a.m., it signifies a spiritual transformation
Hmm.
because it's the dead of night is often associated with spiritual purification or reparation.
Mm,
Don't
interesting.
know what that is. Um, but it can assist people on their journey of inner growth, revealing profound truths about themselves. Now, this is something that I was thinking about when I was doing this research. How many times have you read? I mean, this is potentially a rhetorical question about an author who says they woke up in the middle of the night, they had to jot stuff down because they got this great idea. Have you ever read that? Where someone or
I
a
I
song?
have read it and I've done it.
And
I've only done it once and I was like, "This is it. This is my novel." And I woke up and I wrote it all down and I was like, "This is so great. Yes." And then I went back to sleep and I woke up and I was like, "This is gibberish."
I know, I remember you showing it to me because you're like, "Look, I have the greatest novel," and we're both like, "What?" And that is what I was gonna say is many, many people report that, that they think they're just a genius, oh my gosh, and is it because they're tired, they don't have glasses on, they didn't turn on the light, who knows? But it made me laugh because I've thought of a lot of times I've read that where someone thought, "Oh, this is gonna make me $16 billion. Too bad I can't read it." But and then when we wake up in the morning, the memory is completely gone.
Yep,
Just no
exactly.
idea. I
Exactly.
It reminded me of a time I was writing a paper for college back in the day where we had to save it by doing programming back in
Right.
the olden days. And I hadn't remembered to save it and I lost 5 hours of work. And I'm like, that
Ugh.
was the smartest stuff I've ever done. It probably wasn't, but it kind of reminded me of the same thing. It's like, this could be it.
Yeah,
But
it's like Tenacious D's, song tribute. It's not the greatest song in the world, but it's a tribute to the greatest song in the world.
that's awesome. I could have done tributes to the greatest work by not doing the greatest work. I like it. But anyway, most sources say, "Hey, consider what you hear, think, or listen. Um, what things you might hear or the ideas you might get, if you can, because they could actually be good because they could be messages from the universe."
Mhm.
And also, some people who believe in numerology will come up on that in a little bit as we go on, but there's some meaning about numerology as well related to these time frames. So when people wake up at 3 o'clock, especially if there's no discernible reason, like we were talking about earlier, it might be the time to just consider thoughts that might be coming through the mind. And some people will say if a person wakes up and can't fall right back to sleep, they should get up and do some stuff and then come back to bed. And maybe that's the time where their inner knowing or their great brilliant ideas could actually be written down and read again later. But I know when I'm having a lot of trouble sleeping, sometimes I'll just come into the craft area or sewing room and just do some stuff. And
Yeah.
clean or whatever, because otherwise I just worry about not going back to sleep.
When I was a
So,
kid, I would read a book. I would just go oh, you've never seen my childhood home, but, um, I
oh, I
would
have in pictures.
I would go into the basement, into our family room, and I would just read a book. Um, my parents had 2 giant bookshelves full of books, and I probably read every one of them. Maybe not every one of them, but many of them. It's funny because I did the same thing in my house, had 2 giant bookcases with books because I thought my
Yeah.
kids would do the same thing. None of them have. Not one. But
That's
anyway,
hilarious.
so yeah, and now I try to like, basically hold still and go back to sleep, right? Like you said, don't look at the time or anything, just,
Mhm.
I'm not awake, I'm not awake, I'm not awake." But, it's rare that I will actually get up and get out of bed and, do something because, um, I'm old and tired.
Whatever, you're 10 years younger than I am. Yes, well, and it works for me sometimes, but sometimes that means I go back to bed at about 5 o'clock in the morning and sleep for a few more hours
Yeah.
until I get a little bit more rest. But that's funny. And from one another spiritual view of this 3 o'clock awakening is that it's a message of prosperity, and it provides a unique opportunity to manifest hopes and dreams. And we sort of alluded to that. Also, there are a lot of people that think it's a good time to meditate or pray, because again, it's in that open-minded time, and that way, I one of the things said, if you do stuff like that, then it might not feel like an unwelcome intrusion after all. maybe, maybe because you get something out of it. And
Funny.
then I one of the resources I was looking at said that according to some Muslims, waking up in the middle of the night could represent good news and joy coming into one's life soon. And sometimes it's the arrival of a new baby. I'm
Oh,
100% sure that I do not wake up for that reason, at least not of my own. so, um, but also it talks about waking up with curiosity and expectancy and just invigoration. And maybe it's just a signal of a new season of life. And this one made me laugh. This was point number 6. Be positive. And that I took to mean be positive that there's a good reason for this waking up in the middle of the night, but not not don't get mad. And but it actually was referring to that it's a time to really consider the things that are going on in life and maybe taking out of a negative framework around something that might feel discouraging or a situation that might not be working for a person, and really put some positive thoughts towards it. And maybe this is where the meditation and prayer can come in. And but it made me chuckle a little bit. Be positive. This is a good thing. And so, but this is something that, again, we talked a little bit about angels and spirits might have a better chance of talking to you because they say the spiritual veil is considered thin at this time, and just that it can be a good opportunity for a person to get something good out of these waking times. And then one of the other things is in the book, The Law of Attraction, it talks about these early morning awakenings as a way to bring in the frequencies that align with success, financial freedom, and overall well being. And I know we've both read The Law of Attraction, and I know there's some parts of it that really resonated with me. Does this seem like something that might resonate with you, waking up and having that as an opportunity to have your frequencies of financial freedom and overall well being increased?
I've never thought of it that way.
What do you consider? And then they go on to talk about better money management skills and stuff. I'm like, well,
Uh,
not at 3 o'clock in the morning. Can you imagine if I woke up Max at 3 o'clock in the morning and say, let's put a budget together? He'd be
right?
really happy. I think he'd be thrilled. Thank you for waking me up right now. And we laugh and stuff. But one of the things is that there I do get the idea of taking it as a positive thing because sometimes, especially when I get in that cycle for a week or so and I just cannot sleep and I wake up at 3 or 4, or sometimes several times in between that time, perhaps if I had a better attitude about it and looked maybe at what I could be benefiting from it, it might work better. And I actually might be able to go to sleep more easily. And so that is something to consider. And also, from a physiological standpoint, maybe waking up at 3 a.m. could be the body just trying to adjust the internal clock and rebalance with the natural circadian rhythm. I know when I was working as a new nurse, I worked graveyards, and that was very hard for me.
Mhm.
I could never really get into it and get the amount of sleep I needed to. I kept getting sick all the time. And so that didn't work for me. But some people swear by graveyards. Have you ever done, you did a graveyard at one point, didn't you?
I did graveyards as a CNA for a year while I was in nursing school.
How'd that work for you?
Oh, it sucked. Oh, I actually did graveyards, when I was younger too, when I was married to Sam. I did oh, this was the worst. I did a graveyard shift at Denny's, and then
Hmm.
I came home. I got off at 6, and I came home, and, I would sleep for 4 hours and then have to be at Pizza Hut by 10, and that
Ooh,
was awful. That was but I was young, I was 18, so, you know, but,
some things seem easier at 18 than they do at, I
yeah.
don't know, over
But with
30.
the CNA job, I would come home and I would, um Brett was living in the basement, so I would come home and I would say hi to all the kids and then go to sleep, and he'd get them off to school and everything. Um, but, uh, yeah, it sucked. It was really hard, and I had to go to school, right? I had to work, and then I'd same
Hmm.
thing, I'd sleep for a few hours and then have to be at school. And I I definitely was actually, I could tell some stories that I'm not going to because they're embarrassing, but yeah, it definitely impacted me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's a rare person that can work graveyard and actually be happy and healthy about it.
Yeah, I'm looking at my Fitbit. I'm not being rude and just, watching TikToks or anything. Trying to see if it shows I go to or wake up at, between 2 and
Mm.
3 sorry, 3 and 4 AM or anything, but I don't. This is
But it would be kind of fascinating for people to look and see if they do this or if they notice. I know a
yeah.
lot of these electronics do that. I don't wear my watch at night because I feel like I need to have at least some time in my life that I don't have all the frequencies running through me.
Mm,
And plus I charge it. So some of the things we were just talking about were the spiritual connections or the biblical sort of things where people, there are a lot of resource, or excuse me, references to different scriptures, which I'm not going to bring in right now just for time purposes. But there are a lot of things that it talks about the witching hour, the godly hour, or something like that. That this has been a
interesting interesting how it can be called the godly hour and the devil's hour, right? That's kind of like, "Wait, what?"
yeah, exactly. Kind of the opposite. So, does that mean that also in those moments where we're maybe going to pray or do affirmations or something like that, that we can bring these some people, if they consider the witching hour or the devil hour a dark thing, does that bring light in? I don't
Yeah,
know. I
who
think
knows?
we put value, whatever it is. We've talked about this before, that we assign the value to these things. So is the witching hour or the devil hour a bad thing? And actually, one of the things I found in research is that it used to be called the witching hour across the board. However, when witches started being not evil, and later on in history, it
Mhm.
became the devil's hour, which was also interesting to me because the devil is still a bad dude, according to all of the research I saw. And I mean, I don't know what a person's take on that is. I'm not judging or even advising. However, that was changing it from witching to devil's hour was the politically correct move, apparently. And I thought that was funny. Just because again, we assign what we see in the value or the light or dark or whatever we want to do to for the description. One of the things I was reading about talked about mystical encounters, which, as this is the Mystic Detectives podcast, I said, oh, mystical.
Mm,
Let's see what that says. But the Celtic tradition saw 3 a.m. as a thin place where the veil lifts and the physical and spiritual realms intersect. And that is, I saw that sort of a phrase 3 or 4 times through the research I was doing. And and again, it's in so many different cultures and beliefs that this is a time that this is happening, and the fact that it crosses so many different groups, organizations, beliefs, things like that, was there's not a lot of stuff that does that. There's not
Yeah.
a lot of beliefs that cross so many things, mystical, religious, uh, cultural, all
Mhm.
have something around this 3 to 4 a.m. witching hour, or if they believe 12 to 1 or whatever their witching hour
Yeah.
they believe is.
Yeah.
But like I say, primarily 3 to 4 a.m. And and it's the sudden wake up that in the mystical consideration is that your soul might be returning to your body after traveling in spiritual dimensions or
Mm.
during astral projection or lucid dreaming. And I know that we had our Justin on, who is a galactic shaman, and he talked about the astral travel and projections and things like that. So, dear listener, if you're interested in Justin's perspective on that, listen to the Galactic Shaman episode. And he refers to this not exactly about witching hour, but he does refer to these sorts of experiences. And it's that jolting awake that I know I that's what I do is I jolt, but to me, jolting doesn't mean like bah in panic. It just means sudden awaking. That's what
Yeah.
I do because that's when I wake up, that's what I do. I'm just totally awake.
Um,
And
that's only true for me in these cases where it's 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever. Like,
mhm,
when I wake up because my alarm went off,
mhm,
I mean, I think I kinda stay half asleep, and actually, I'm one of those people that has to set 3 alarms
mhm,
so that I absolutely, definitely get up for the thing I need to get up for. Um, but but yeah, but yeah, when it's the middle of the night, I feel the same way, that it's um, just this all of a sudden, "Okay, I'm awake." Like,
mhm,
from sleep
mhm.
to wake, and agree, not, like, dramatic, just not anything in between. It's, like, from sleep to wake.
Right. And that is, I think, different from the times where they talk about night terrors and other things like that, because that's very definitive, or the night paralysis and things like that. That is very different.
Yeah, yeah.
But this sort of just sudden awakening, because like you, with alarm clock, I can really jolt in an unpleasant way. Although I did find if I change my ringtone when I wake up to an alarm, it's much better. And so I've done
Yeah,
that.
so it's not
Although I
meh, meh, meh,
right.
meh.
And
That's
that's
like,
mo
I have PTSD from that fricking sound.
completely. Completely. That's funny. One of the resources I looked at said in Eastern medicine, the energy meridian that runs through the lungs and large intestines peak at 3 a.m. And and in the Chinese, traditional Chinese medicine, this meridian change influences intuition and ability to think clearly according to the Chinese beliefs.
Interesting.
So yeah, and it's just every single resource said, pay attention to these downloads, pay attention to this time, see if there's any message you get to have. And and I ever since I've done the research, I thought, gosh, okay, I'm going to pay attention. And I don't remember ever waking up really with some major download or anything. So maybe I'm doing astral projections or something where I'm just suddenly coming back to my body and just enjoying the ride. I don't know.
Right.
Um, and then also in the yogic philosophy, it goes along with the energy channels along the spine, and they will the right and left energy channels will switch dominance at 3 a.m. And um, this balance changes and boosts creativity, insight, and inspiration. So again, just another way to look at it. And the Reiki energy method, they talk about blocked emotions and energy often released at 3 a.m. I don't remember hearing that in my Reiki training, but
I don't either.
I'm sure I don't remember every single thing I've ever learned in that. And so it was just fascinating to me, all these different things. And one of the resources I read suggested that maybe when going to sleep, ask for a sign, ask for something that you could get an answer to, some intentional waking. Because for heaven's sakes, if
Sure.
I'm going to be awake from 3 to 4, I may as well get something out of it, right?
Yeah, no
And
kidding.
so, and I really like that idea a lot. And um, one of the things I was telling you about numbers. So the number three well, all numbers, people who look at numerology believe have messages. And so the number three represents spiritually, in this resource anyway, completeness and wholeness. And it brings past, present, and future together: birth, life, death, and the three stages of the human life. And then also it brings Holy Trinity together: Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. So that covers a lot of the things that people might believe in, is that 3 o'clock representing spirituality. And excuse me. And I didn't look up any other numerology on three. Do you know any other numerology related to threes?
I don't know
Because
anything about numerology other than what we learned in our numerology episode of the podcast.
right. And I don't know really anything more on that either. And one of the things that was frequently asked is, waking up at 3 a.m. a warning sign, or is it scary? Should I be worried? And basically every source I looked at said no. No, you shouldn't.
That's awesome.
But again, maybe if there's information, look at it, see what it
Yeah.
is. And also, again, the assigning of value, or light or dark. They said you can make this as positive or negative as you want. And we certainly invite you to make it a positive experience, don't we? I mean,
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
always my advice.
Yeah, I agree.
And so I just found it fascinating that so many, well, literally every resource referred to these same sorts of things. And so I was thinking that the next time you wake up abruptly at exactly 3 o'clock, or somewhere in between 3 and 4, just consider what it might be telling you. Are you feeling some sort of creativity? Are you looking at an opportunity? Are you having some ideas, or anything like that? Then
Yeah.
maybe write it down, maybe use a light to do it. Put on the glasses, whatever it takes, or just curl back into your bed and get up later when you really want to be awake. Do you have any other thoughts about witching hour, or any of things like that that you might want to bring in?
Um, no, but I like that we had this conversation because I am going to pay attention now and just see what is happening. When how often this is happening that I'm waking up at 3 or between 3 and 4. And yeah, I'm curious now.
Hmm.
Hey, I'm
Do you want?
curious.
You're
Just like
curious. Should you stay curious?
I think I'll stay curious.
And would you keep exploring?
I will definitely keep exploring.
That's super awesome. Now, would you like to hear something kind of creepy?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Always, right?
Yes.
So, do you know what horror story was based on the real life tragic event of Ronald Butch Defoe Jr.?
No, I don't know.
Well, it's the Amityville Horror book.
Ah.
So, it was truly a real life event. So, at 3 a.m. on November 13th, 1974, Ronald Butch Defoe Jr. shot his mother, father, and four siblings.
It's Art's birthday.
Dude, in 1974?
Yes.
I didn't know that, or at
That's
least I didn't remember it.
Art's an
Wow.
Amityville baby. Holy crap.
No
Okay, please continue.
But it was at 3 a.m. he killed his family while they were
Wow.
sleeping. And so there was a lot of study about that. And they when the event happened, it was considered unusual because the neighbors didn't hear any gunshots. Nobody woke up before they got shot, none of the family members, and there were no signs of struggles. And so
Interesting.
this murder reinstated the belief of 3 a.m. being the hour of the devil,
Mm, mhm.
because Defoe told detectives that he had previously heard voices in his head and when he was a trance-like state, explaining, "Once I started, I just couldn't stop. It went so fast." And I thought, "Oh my goodness, that was that was scary." And
Yeah.
the fact that some of these things, we talked about assigning light or dark to these things. He definitely assigned dark to
Yeah.
something you may have heard, and there's other underlying concerns that he had going on. But it was fascinating to me that this is the case. And there are a lot of books that refer to the witching hour, and some of them are you know, well, most of them are fiction. And so this was an actual event, the book, Amityville Horror was based on, but it was at 3 o'clock. What do you think about
Wow,
that?
that's wild.
Yeah. And when there's another book that was written, and it was Ray Bradbury's 1962 novel, Something Wicked This Way Comes. Did you
Ah,
ever read that?
I didn't read it, but it's one of
Yeah,
my favorite Disney movies, and it
there you go.
creeped me out so much.
Right.
I It was like my favorite creepy movie ever. And I watched it
Well,
as an adult recently, and it's still creepy.
and in the novel, it states that more people die in hospitals at 3 a.m. than any other time, and that's unproven. However, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration confirmed that most drunk driving accidents, around 55%, occur between midnight and 3 a.m. Now, we talked about that already because that's when bars are slowing down, people are going home after drinking and stuff like that. So that makes sense. What do you think? Do you think it's related to the witching hour, or just the fact the bars are closed?
Mm, I think it's probably related to the fact that the bars are closed. They're closing.
Yes, I feel like it's true. And one of the last things I wanted to bring up is in the research it said, well, if you wake up at between 3 and 4 every morning, it could be linked to depression, could be because you have, what do you say, insomnia? And so there there is some suggestion that you stay away from caffeine and other stimulants, and eat sensibly, exercise regularly, and it might help a person get better sleep. So that is our public service announcement for today. Please eat well, exercise, and do all of the things that your might suggest, and then you might sleep better. But I mean, I really believe that that's true. I can often link the fact that I haven't slept well to one of those factors being off. And but I am open now to potentially seeing if I get any messages or anything, and maybe learn something about that time. And the final thing I wanted to bring up is that in 2017, between May and August, there was a big internet challenge, and it was called the 3 a.m.
Mm,
challenge. And the idea behind it was to wake up during this hour with hopes of capturing something on camera or having a paranormal visitor or something like that. And this was something that nobody really found anything significant out of. And I would think that it's probably because these people woke themselves up
mhm,
to have this experience. It was not a natural waking up,
mhm.
but that trend lasted, as I said, from May to August, and it died out. Nobody kept doing that.
Bummer.
So anyway, that's the end of what I've got, and I invite our listeners to check out if they wake up from 3 to 4, as we said, and see what they find.
Yep, I think that's a great idea. I'm gonna do it.
Perfect.
Have a good night.
And have a good night to you. We'd love to hear from our listeners. To leave a comment, share a story, or ask a question, email us at listeners@mysticdetectives.com. You can also find out about our Patreon and other interesting things going on at our website, mysticdetectives.com. As always, we invite you to subscribe, share, and leave reviews to support the podcast. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week. Stay curious.
And keep exploring.